The night was quiet, the stars above were bright and cold, the forest trees stood tall and dark, and only the sound of the wind moved through the leaves. Then, the silence broke. A sudden light ripped across the sky, glowing brighter than the moon. It looked like a falling star, but it was too big, too alive, too strange. The ground shook when the object crashed beyond the hills. Birds screamed into the night sky, and animals ran away in fear. In a small village not far from the forest, people came out of their homes. They looked at the smoke rising, and they whispered to each other. Some said it was a curse. Others said it was a sign from the heavens. Many were too afraid to go near. But one man did not fear. He was different. A wanderer, a builder, someone who worked with stone and earth. His name was not known to all, but his hands were strong and his heart was steady. When he saw the light, he felt something calling him, as if fate had opened a new path. He took his lantern, he took his hammer, and he walked alone toward the forest. The night grew darker, the trees grew thicker, but the glow of the crash guided him. Every step was heavy, every sound made him pause, but his curiosity was stronger than fear. When he reached the clearing, he saw something strange, something that no human had seen before. A broken ship lay there, half buried in the soil, its surface shining with silver metal and blue lines. It hummed with a dying energy. The air smelled of fire and ash, the ground was burned, and the ship's walls were cracked. He took a deep breath, his heart beating faster, and then he heard it, a soft sound, a cry, not of any beast, not of any bird, but the cry of someone in pain. He followed the sound, and there, among the broken pieces, he found her. An alien woman, lying on the ground, her skin pale with a soft glow, her eyes closed, her body weak, her clothes torn. She was not human, yet not a monster. Her face was delicate, her hair long and silver, her hands trembling as she tried to move. For a moment the man froze, his mind raced. Should he run? Should he hide? Or should he help? But then he saw her eyes open, wide and full of fear, and also full of sorrow. She looked at him as if she had been running forever, as if she had lost everything. Her lips moved, but her words were broken, not of his language, only a whisper of pain. The man knelt beside her, his lantern glowing on her strange face. He saw the wounds, he saw the tears, and something inside him spoke louder than fear. She had nowhere to go, nowhere to rest. She was lost, and he, a simple human, was the only one standing before her. He gave her water, holding the flask gently to her lips. She drank slowly, her eyes never leaving his. She did not know him, and he did not know her, but in that moment, something passed between them, a fragile trust. The man looked at the broken ship, then back at her. He understood she could not survive there. The cold night would take her life. So, with strong arms, he lifted her. She was light, almost weightless, as if her body was made of air and light. She trembled, but she did not resist. She let herself rest against his shoulder, step by step. He carried her away from the crash, back through the forest, back toward the hills, back toward the small house he had built with stone. Behind them, the ship hissed with smoke. The blue lights faded, and the night swallowed the wreck. Above, the stars watched in silence, as if keeping the secret of her arrival. The man did not know who she was, or where she came from. He did not know if danger followed her, or if her people would come. But he knew one thing. She was alone, and now her fate was tied to his. When they reached his stone house, he laid her on a simple bed. He covered her with cloth. He placed water near her side, and he watched her breathing. She was fragile, yet there was a hidden strength in her face, something noble, something untold. The man sat near the fire, his thoughts heavy. He had found an alien, a woman from beyond the stars, and now she was under his roof. The village would never believe him, the world would never understand. But he had seen her eyes, and in those eyes was a story that had not yet been told. Outside, the night grew colder, the forest grew quiet again, and the smoke from the crash drifted slowly into the sky. The man closed his eyes for a moment, knowing tomorrow would bring questions. But one truth was clear. The alien woman had nowhere to go, and fate had chosen him to be the one who found her. And so the story began, with a falling light, a broken ship, and a human heart that chose to help instead of fear. Because sometimes the greatest journeys begin not with power, but with a single act of kindness. The morning sun touched the hills, its golden light sliding slowly across the stone house. The forest was calm, birds sang again, and the smoke of the crash far away was almost gone. Inside the house, the human sat near the fire, his eyes fixed on the stranger who now rested under his roof. The alien woman breathed softly, her chest rising and falling, her skin glowing faint in the daylight, her silver hair spread over the rough blanket. She looked peaceful in her sleep, but her face still carried the shadow of fear, the kind of fear that stays even when the body rests. The man had many questions. His mind raced. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why had fate brought her to him? But he knew answers would not come if he pushed. Trust was not built with questions. Trust was built with patience. So he waited. He prepared food, simple bread and boiled roots, and placed a small bowl of water near her hand. Hours passed. The fire burned low, and then her eyes opened. Her eyes were strange, deep and glowing, like pieces of a distant star. She blinked at the roof, at he walls of stone, and then at him. For a long moment she did not move. She only stared, her body tense, her hands gripping the blanket as if ready to run. The man raised his hands slowly, showing they were empty. No weapon, no harm, only peace. He spoke softly. "You are safe here." Though he knew she would not understand his words, the tone mattered more than the meaning. She whispered something in her own language, the sound soft like wind, but he could not understand. Her lips trembled, her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. She tried to rise, but her body was weak. Her legs failed her, and she fell back against the blanket. The man moved closer, not too close, only enough to offer the bowl of water. She hesitated, her eyes sharp, as if searching his face for lies. At last she reached out, her hand shaking, and she took the bowl. She drank slowly, carefully, watching him all the while. When she finished, she let the bowl rest by her side, and for the first time, her shoulders relaxed a little. The man gave her food, placing it on a wooden plate. She looked at it with suspicion, but hunger was stronger. She tasted, then ate slowly. Every bite seemed to calm her. Every swallow gave her back a piece of strength. The man did not speak. He did not rush. He only watched, waiting for the moment she would choose to trust. Later, when the sun reached high, she tried again to speak. This time her words were broken, mixed with sounds that almost touched his language. Why help? Human, she whispered, her voice weak. The man leaned forward, his face calm, his voice steady. Because you needed help. She frowned, confusion in her glowing eyes, as if she had never heard such a reason before. She turned her face away, her gaze lost in the fire. Her hands pulled the blanket close around her body. Slowly she whispered more, words half broken. No home, no people, nowhere to go. Her voice cracked at the last words, and tears ran down her pale cheeks. The human builder felt a weight in his chest. He did not know her story, but he knew the pain of loss when he saw it. Without thinking, he spoke again. Then stay here. Simple words, simple truth. She looked at him sharply, her eyes wide, almost afraid, almost hopeful. The silence between them stretched long, broken only by the fire, by the wind through the cracks of stone. Then she gave the smallest nod, her lips pressed tight, as if she wanted to believe, but did not know how. That small nod was the first bridge, fragile like glass, but a bridge still. The days that followed were slow, but each day a piece of trust grew. The man showed her the tools he used, stone hammers, chisels, wood axes. He placed them before her but never forced her touch. She watched as he worked outside, carrying stone, shaping walls, repairing the roof of his house. She did not understand his ways, but she saw his strength, his patience, the steady rhythm of his hands. Sometimes she would step outside, her steps weak but curious. She would touch the stones he shaped, feeling their rough strength. When he noticed her watching, he would give a small smile, not words, just a smile, and she would quickly look away, though a faint warmth touched her face. At night, when the fire burned, she sometimes whispered small pieces of her story, broken and unclear. Words like war, lost, escape, floated into the air, words heavy with sorrow. He listened without interruption, though he could not understand all. He understood the pain behind them, and each time she shared, her eyes looked less like stone and more like water, fragile but alive. One evening, as the stars filled the sky, she sat by the doorway, her silver hair shining in the moonlight. She turned to him and said slowly, "Human, you build strong." It was the first time she spoke without fear, the first time her voice carried something like respect. He nodded, answering simply, "Stone is strong," and then he added, "But hearts can be stronger." She stared at him, her glowing eyes wide, and for a moment she almost smiled. Trust had not fully grown. It was still fragile, like a young plant in hard soil. But it was there, a beginning, a chance. And though neither of them knew it, that fragile trust would soon be tested in ways greater than either could imagine. The days turned slower, but also stronger. Each sunrise brought new work, and each night ended with the sound of the fire inside the stone house. The alien woman, still weak but healing, would often watch the human builder with quiet eyes. She spoke little, but her silence was not empty. It carried questions, wonder, and sometimes fear. The man, however, was not one to sit still. He believed work was the answer to many things, so he began his task, a task that would change both of them. One morning, before the sun had risen high, he carried his hammer and his chisel into the forest. The alien woman followed slowly, her silver hair catching the light. She said nothing, but her eyes asked the question, where was he going? What was he doing? He pointed at a hill where stone jutted out, hard and rough. Then he struck it with his hammer. The sound echoed, sharp and strong. Stone, he said simply, his voice calm. Stone builds, stone protects. The woman tilted her head, her glowing eyes reflecting the sunlight. She whispered softly, why build? Why for me? The man only smiled, a small smile that reached his eyes. Because you have nowhere to go, so I will give you somewhere, she stared at him as if the idea itself was strange, as if kindness was a language unknown to her world. Day by day, the work began. The man lifted heavy rocks, cutting them into shapes with patient strikes. His hands grew rough, but he never slowed. He carried the stone on his back. His shoulders bent, but his spirit steady. The alien woman watched from the shade, sometimes stepping closer, sometimes reaching to touch the stone as if testing its strength. Each time she touched the stone, her fingers glowed faintly, as if her energy connected with the earth itself. The man noticed, but he did not ask. He simply let her be. Trust was still fragile, and trust needed time. Soon, a wall began to rise. One stone stacked upon another, not perfect, not smooth, but solid. The woman's eyes widened. She whispered in awe, human makes mountain move. The man chuckled softly. Not a mountain, only a wall. But to her, it was more than a wall. It was hope. It was proof that humans could shape the world with nothing but their hands and will. At first she only watched, her body still weak, but after some days she began to help in small ways. She gathered water, her steps careful but steady. She picked small branches for fire, and once, when the man cut his hand on sharp stone, she placed her glowing fingers on the wound. The wound closed slowly, the blood stopped, and the pain faded. The man looked at her in silence. She looked back with shy eyes and then turned away. She had secrets in her, powers unknown, but she shared them carefully, as if afraid he would fear her. Together, they built not only walls, but a bond. The man showed her how stone must be balanced, how each rock supports the next, and how patience makes the strongest home. She listened, nodding, sometimes trying to repeat his words, her voice broken but learning. Once, she carried a small stone and placed it on the wall, her hands trembling, but her face proud. The man nodded in approval. Good, he said simply, and her lips curved into the smallest smile. As the days stretched, the shelter grew, the walls reached higher, the roof took shape with wood and stone, and the fire inside gave warmth at night. The alien woman often sat near the half-built wall, her eyes watching the stars as if remembering her lost world. One night she whispered, "On my world, no one build like this. Machines build, people do not. People forget hands." The man answered, his voice steady. "Hands remember, hands keep us human." She looked at him long, her glowing eyes soft, as if trying to understand the strange pride in his words. But trust was not yet complete. Sometimes she woke in the night with fear, calling out in her broken tongue. The man would rise, place more wood on the fire, and sit nearby until she calmed. She never asked him to stay, but he did. And slowly, the fear in her eyes grew weaker, replaced by something gentler. When the shelter finally stood, strong and simple, made of stone and wood, the man stepped back to look at it, his chest rising with quiet pride. The alien woman stood beside him, her silver hair moving in the wind, her glowing eyes wide with wonder. "This, for me," she whispered, as if still unable to believe. The man nodded. "For you, for us." She touched the wall gently, her fingers glowing against the stone, and for the first time, her voice carried a soft laugh, a sound like music from another world. That laugh was small, but it carried great weight. It was the sound of trust beginning to bloom. The man listened, and he smiled, not because of stone, not because of walls, but because he had given her something greater. He had given her a home, and in return, she had given him a sign that her heart was slowly opening. The shelter was finished, but their journey was only beginning, for while they built walls of stone, the shadows of the sky were never far away, and, soon, the trust they had built would face its first true test. The shelter of stone now stood strong, its walls thick, its roof firm, the fire inside glowing each night like a small heart beating against the dark forest. The human builder worked each day with steady hands, but his thoughts were often on the alien woman, the strange guest who now shared his home. She helped in small ways, bringing water, stacking wood, or placing light stones on the wall, yet her presence was more than work. It was mystery, and mystery pressed on his mind. She was not like him. Her glowing skin, her silver hair, her eyes that shone like pieces of a faraway star, all reminded him of the night she fell from the sky. She spoke little, her words broken, but each night by the fire, she seemed closer to sharing something deeper. The human waited, patient, knowing that trust cannot be forced, it must be given. One evening, the fire crackled soft, the smoke rising slow into the air. The man sat sharpening a tool of stone. The alien woman sat across from him, her eyes fixed on the flames. Her face was calm, yet her hands trembled on her knees, as if carrying a weight she could no longer hold. At last, she whispered, her voice weak but steady. "I tell you." The man raised his eyes, silent, waiting. She touched her chest lightly, then pointed upward to the sky, her words broken. "My world. Gone." The human's hand stilled, his heart heavy at the sound. She spoke again, slowly with effort. "Invaders. Came. Fire. War. All end." Her voice cracked, and her glowing eyes filled with tears. She pressed her hands together as if showing a great city, then she spread them apart, as if showing it breaking. "People. Hunted. Many die. Some escape. Ships. But enemy follow," she whispered. Her silver hair fell over her face, hiding her pain, but her voice carried the truth. The man listened, the firelight dancing over his stone-hard face, his chest heavy with her sore. He understood little of the names or places, but he understood loss. She had lost her world, her people, her home, and now she was alone. She raised her hand, pointing at him, then at the walls of stone around them. "This home," she said softly, her voice trembling. Then she shook her head, her eyes fearful. "Not safe. They come. They always come." Her words hung heavy in the air, a shadow darker than the night outside. The human put down his tool, his voice calm. "Here, you are safe." She stared at him, her glowing eyes searching his face, as if testing if he truly believed his own words. Slowly her hands lowered, her body eased, but her eyes never lost the shadow of fear. In the days that followed, she spoke more, each night a new piece of her past. She told of tall towers on her world, shining bright with light, of rivers that glowed under twin moons, of voices singing in a language as soft as wind. She told of laughter, of children with glowing hair running under silver skies, of families who built with crystal and light instead of stone and wood. The man listened in silence, trying to imagine such wonders, his rough hands holding a simple hammer while her words painted pictures of a world now gone. But her stories always ended the same, with fire, with screams, with ships falling from the sky. The invaders, she said, had no faces, only cold masks. They burned everything. They left nothing. She ran, her people scattered, some taken, some lost. Her voice cracked when she spoke of them, and she would fall silent for hours after. The man never pressed her. He only kept the fire strong and the house warm. One night, as the wind howled outside, she showed him something hidden. From the folds of her torn clothing, she pulled a small crystal, glowing faintly with blue light. "This last," she whispered, "memory of my world." The crystal pulsed like a heartbeat, and for a moment the firelight seemed to fade, replaced by visions. The man saw shadows of tall towers, silver rivers, glowing skies. He saw faces smiling, voices singing, and then fire swallowing it all. The vision ended quickly, leaving only the faint glow of the crystal in her hands. She looked at him, her eyes wet. I keep, but cannot keep forever. Her voice cracked. Enemy follow. They smell. They take. The human stared at the crystal, then at her, his jaw set, his voice steady. Then they will not take, not here. She trembled, her lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. She saw the strength in his face, the calm in his eyes, and for the first time, she let herself lean forward. Her head rested on his shoulder, light as air, fragile as glass, but real. The man did not move. He let her rest, the fire warming them both. That night, she shared her deepest secret, her deepest wound, and he carried it without fear. The fragile trust between them grew stronger, shaped not by stone this time, but by truth. Yet outside, the forest was not blind, and the stars above watched in silence, for secrets once spoken have a way of calling those who hunt them. The stone shelter stood quiet under the night sky. Smoke curled slowly from its roof, the fire inside glowing like a small sun. The alien woman sat near the doorway, her silver hair bright in the moonlight, her glowing eyes fixed on the stars above. The human builder worked nearby, shaping wood with his knife, each stroke steady, patient, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Days had passed since she shared her secret, the story of her lost world, the crystal memory she carried, the pain of being hunted. Since then, something had changed between them, not in words but in the silence, a softer silence, one that spoke of trust beginning to grow. They were two souls from two worlds, yet under one roof, under one fire, they began to learn each other. The human showed her his ways. He taught her how to carry stone, how to balance wood, how to tie branches with rope made of vines. At first her hands were clumsy, her movements weak, but she listened, she watched, and slowly she learned. He showed her how patience built strength, how mistakes were only steps forward, and she repeated his words in her broken tongue. Stone strong, but patience stronger. The alien woman shared her ways too. She showed him how to read the sky, how to follow the lines of stars to know time. She showed him how plants in the forest carried hidden power, leaves that healed, roots that gave warmth. Her hands glowed faint when she touched them, and she taught him which to keep and which to avoid. The man listened with wide eyes, his rough hands careful as he followed her guidance. He was a builder of stone, but now he began to learn the language of stars and plants. Together they built not just walls but a rhythm of life. In the mornings the man cut stone, the woman gathered water. In the afternoons they worked side by side, their hands moving in different ways but toward the same goal. In the evenings they sat by the fire, trading words, broken but growing, he learning her language, she learning his. Every laugh, every smile, every shared silence made the bond stronger. One day, as the sun climbed high, the man showed her a new part of the forest. There was a river there, hidden between tall rocks, its water clear and cold. He dipped his hands in, splashing water on his face. She followed, kneeling by the river, her fingers glowing faint. As they touched the surface, the water shimmered under her touch, rippling with strange light. She smiled for the first time, not a small smile, but one full and bright. The man stared, his chest heavy. He had seen beauty in stone, in mountains, in the rising sun, but never in a smile like hers. She caught him staring and quickly turned away, her cheeks glowing faint, but the bond had already grown deeper. Another evening, as the fire burned low, she whispered something new. On her world, bonds were sealed not by words but by shared work. By building together, she touched the stone wall they had raised, her glowing eyes soft. This, our bond, she said. The man nodded, his voice quiet but firm. Our bond. For him, stone was life. For her, stone was new. Yet together, stone had become a bridge between worlds. But bonds are tested, and trust is not without shadow. One night, while the fire burned low, the alien woman woke suddenly, her eyes wide with fear. She clutched the crystal close, her body shaking. The man rose quickly, his hand on her shoulder. What is it? He asked. Though she barely understood his words, she whispered in her broken voice. They, searching, always searching, never stop. Her eyes filled with tears. If they find, you die too. The man shook his head, his face hard like stone. Then let them come. She stared at him, shocked, as if no one had ever spoken such words for her before. In her world, people had run, people had hidden, but here stood a human who chose to fight, not for himself alone, but for her. Her lips trembled, her voice cracked. Why? The man's answer was simple, his voice calm. Because you are not alone. That night, she did not sleep alone. She sat close by the fire with him, their shoulders nearly touching, their silence deep. The fear in her eyes softened, replaced by something gentler, something brighter. The bond of two worlds had begun, built not on power or weapons, but on patience, kindness, and the courage to share pain. As dawn came, the woman stepped outside, the sunlight catching her silver hair. She raised her face to the sky and whispered words in her own language, words the man did not understand, but her voice was soft, peaceful, like a prayer. The man watched from the doorway, his heart steady. He did not know her words, but he knew their meaning, gratitude, hope, and trust. The bond was now real, fragile yet strong. And though shadows still moved in the stars above, they faced them not as strangers anymore, but as something more. A builder of stone and a woman of stars, two worlds bound together, waiting for the storm that was sure to come. The forest slept under a quiet night. The stars above glimmered like silver dust, and the river whispered softly in the dark. Inside the stone shelter, the fire burned low, casting gentle light on the alien woman and the human builder. They sat in silence, their bond now strong but still fragile. The days of peace had brought them closer. Their hands had built walls, their hearts had built trust, yet the woman's eyes often wandered to the sky, filled with shadows only she could feel. One evening, as the moon climbed high, the woman stepped outside, her glowing eyes staring at the stars, her breath trembling. The man followed, standing near but not speaking. He knew when her silence carried fear. Suddenly she raised her hand, pointing upward, her voice sharp and broken. There. See. Lights. The man looked. At first he saw nothing, only stars, but then, faint and moving, came strange lights sliding across the heavens. They were not stars, not natural. Their movement was too fast, too sharp, like hunters searching the dark. The woman trembled, her silver hair falling over her face. They come, she whispered. They find me. Her body shook. Her hands clutched the crystal she carried. Her eyes filled with terror. The man placed a strong hand on her shoulder, his voice calm though his chest grew heavy. Then we prepare. The next day, the builder worked harder than ever, his hands moving stone, his arms carrying wood, his eyes sharp. He built higher walls around the shelter. He dug the ground to set traps, pits covered with branches, sharpened stakes hidden in the earth. He shaped stone into weapons, rough but strong, heavy in the hand. The alien woman watched, fear still in her eyes, but also wonder, for she had never seen such determination in one so simple. Her people had relied on machines, but this human used nothing but earth, fire, and will. At night, she whispered warnings, her broken words carrying dread. They strong, ships of fire. Weapons cut light. The man only nodded, his voice steady. Stone is strong too, and so are we. She shook her head. You cannot fight them, her eyes wet with fear, but the man answered with quiet certainty. I can try, and I will not run. Together they prepared. The woman used her faint power, her glowing hands weaving energy into small stones, making them harder, sharper. She touched the traps he built, and they hummed faintly with her energy, more deadly now. The man sharpened wood into spears, set stones above doorways ready to fall, and taught her how to hold a hammer, how to strike. She listened, her body weak but her spirit rising. She had been hunted all her life, but for the first time she felt the ground of defense under her feet. One night, as the fire burned low, she sat by the wall, her eyes glowing softly. She whispered, On my world we ran, we hid, no one stand, but you, human stand. The man looked at her, his face calm. Sometimes stone breaks, but sometimes stone does not, and I will not. Her lips trembled, and for a moment she placed her hand over his, her glowing skin warm against his rough hand. It was a silent promise, not of safety, but of standing together. The following night, the threat returned, stronger, and Sue. Loser! From the forest came a strange hum, deep and unnatural. The ground vibrated faintly. The woman's eyes widened. She whispered, They near, too near. The man took his hammer, his grip firm, his jaw tight. He placed her behind the stone walls, near the fire, and said, Stay here. If they come, do not fear. But she shook her head, her voice breaking. I fight too. No run. The hum grew louder. Shadows moved between the trees. Glowing eyes appeared in the dark, cold and merciless. Figures stepped forward, tall, armored, their faces hidden behind black masks, their bodies shining with strange metal. The woman gasped, her body trembling. Them, she whispered. The hunters. The man raised his hammer, his eyes steady. Then they will learn what stone can do. The invaders moved closer, their weapons glowing, faint with energy. The man gave a shout, a raw cry of defiance, and pulled a hidden rope. A trap sprung, a pit opened. Two of the hunters fell into the spikes below, their bodies thrashing, their lights flickering out. The others paused, their heads turning, but the human wasted no time. He hurled a stone shaped like a spear, striking one and breaking its mask. The woman cried out, her hands glowing. She lifted a stone and sent it crashing with energy into another. For the first time she fought, her power not to run but to strike. The forest filled with chaos, the hunters advanced, but the traps slowed them. The stones broke their ranks, the firelight blinded them. The human fought with raw strength, his hammer breaking masks, his traps taking enemies one by one. The alien woman fought with light, her energy glowing, striking, pushing back. Side by side they stood, not as strangers, not as victim and savior, but as two against many. At last the remaining hunters pulled back, their bodies sparking, their lights fading into the trees. The forest fell silent. Again, the hum gone, only the sound of their heavy breathing remained. The man lowered his hammer, sweat running down his face, his chest rising with fire and pride. The woman stood beside him, her glowing hands fading, her eyes wide with disbelief. They run, she whispered, almost not believing. They run from you. The man looked at her, his voice steady. They run from us. Her lips parted, her eyes wet with tears, but not of fear, this time of hope. She had seen death, she had seen destruction, but never had she seen the hunters turn away. Never until now. The night was not safe, the war was not ended, but a new truth had been born. Stone and light, human and alien, two worlds stood together, and the hunters had felt fear for the first time. The forest lay in silence after the battle. Smoke curled above the broken ground. The pits and traps filled with shattered pieces of the hunters, their strange metal bodies still glowing faint in the dark. The human builder stood with his hammer heavy in his hand, sweat dripping from his brow, his chest rising with deep breaths. Beside him, the alien woman leaned against the stone wall, her glowing hands fading, her body trembling from the power she had used, but her eyes alive with something new, not only fear, but hope. For the first time in her life, she had seen the hunters turn back. She had seen them retreat, not because of machines, not because of great armies, but because of a single human who refused to fall. She looked at him, her voice weak but steady. You, not break. The man's face was calm, his eyes sharp. Stone does not break, he said, his voice steady as the earth. But the peace did not last. The night carried whispers of more danger. The hunters were not gone. They were waiting, watching, ready to strike again with greater force. The alien woman trembled, her hands clutching the crystal close to her chest. They return, stronger, always return. The man placed his hand over hers, firm, steady. Then we return too. We fight again, as many times as needed. The next day they worked together with fire in their hearts. The human rebuilt the traps, stronger than before, stones balanced above the walls, ready to fall like thunder. The woman used her energy to carve strange lines into the stones, runes that glowed faintly, making the walls stronger. Together they prepared not only to survive, but to resist. As the sun set, the ground shook once more. The trees trembled, and the sky above burned with new lights. The hunters had returned more than before, their armor brighter, their weapons glowing like fire. The woman's heart filled with fear, but the man's eyes hardened. He lifted his hammer, his voice deep, then let them come. The hunters advanced, their steps heavy, their cold masks reflecting the firelight of the shelter. The woman whispered, "Too many," but the man shook his head. "Not too many, not tonight." With a roar, he pulled the first trap. Stones fell from above, crashing into the hunters, breaking armor, scattering them like broken twigs. The ground shook with the force. The forest echoed with their metallic cries. The hunters charged, but the woman lifted her hands, her power glowing bright. A wave of light surged from her, striking them back. The man swung his hammer, striking masks, breaking weapons, his strength like the earth itself. Side by side they fought, stone and light, strength and energy, human and alien. The hunters pressed harder, their weapons cutting the air with beams of fire. The woman cried out, her body weak from using too much energy. The man stood before her, taking the blows on his stone shield, his arms shaking but his spirit unbroken. He shouted, his voice carrying through the night, "You will not take her." Something changed then, something more than stone, more than strength. It was will, pure and unshaken, the heart of humanity burning against the darkness. The hunters hesitated, their cold masks facing the man, as if for the first time they felt something strange, not weakness, but fear. The man pressed forward, his hammer striking, his traps falling, his voice roaring with defiance. The alien woman, inspired by his unbreakable spirit, rose again, her hands glowing brighter than ever before. Together, they unleashed fury, stone crashing, light burning, the hunters falling one by one. At last, the remaining hunters turned, their lights fading as they fled into the forest, broken, defeated. The man lowered his hammer, his body heavy, his breath deep. The woman stumbled, but he caught her, steadying her with his arms. She looked at him, her glowing eyes wide with disbelief, her voice trembling. "They fear you." The man shook his head, his voice quiet but firm. "They fear us." The forest grew silent again, the stars watching above, the fire glowing behind the stone walls. The alien woman rested against him, her voice soft. "On my world, we had machines. We had power, but we lost heart. We forgot courage. We forgot fight." Her eyes filled with tears. "But you show me, human heart, stronger than any weapon." The man looked at her, his rough face soft. "A heart of stone," he said simply. That night they sat together by the fire, the hunters gone, but not forever. They knew more would come. The war was not ended, but the first victory had been theirs. The woman no longer looked at the sky with only fear. She looked with hope, for she had found not only shelter, but strength. She whispered in her language, words the man could not understand, but her tone carried love, gratitude, and promise. The man listened, his heart calm, his spirit steady. He did not need to know. The words, he knew their meaning, and so under the stars a bond of stone and light was sealed. A human and an alien, two worlds bound together standing against darkness. The hunters would come again, stronger, fiercer, but they would face not one alone, but two hearts united. He had given her a home, but she had given him something greater, a reason to fight beyond himself. And in that, humanity had shown its true power, not in machines, not in weapons, but in the courage of a single heart that refuses to break.